Good afternoon, it's Gareth Wood again with a new story for this week. Apologies for a slight delay in the latest story. There wasn't one last week, but I've been up to my neck in the final throes of the edit for the new novel, plus quite a lot of other business around writing, which a video in a few days' time is going to address. So in the meantime, it's a brand new story called Freehold, and is ultimately dedicated to anyone that's experienced the grotesque indignity of buying or selling a house. Okay, here we go. Ed Pecker was eating sausage and mash when his doorbell rang. Not expecting anyone, his mouth sat agape for a moment in dull thought, and did not close until he felt a dribble of gravy on his chin. He lapped it off with his tongue and grimaced. Who could it be? No one rings the doorbell after 8 p.m. Pecker couldn't even recall the last time someone visited without an invite. In fact, as he lowered his plate and walked cautiously towards the door, he couldn't remember the last visitor he'd had that wasn't a moaning electrician or an electoral canvasser whose shit-eating grin entered his hallway 10 minutes before the rest of their face. The light flickered on in the hallway and obscured all but the outlines of two figures beyond the freckled glass. Pecker's slippers slapped horribly and softly on the tiles as he moved towards the door. Unlocking the latch and pulling back the chain, Pecker opened the door and was greeted by two crescents of illuminated teeth. "Mr. Pecker," the man said loudly, as Ed adjusted his sight and tried to distinguish the face from which the words had emanated. "It is Mr. Pecker, isn't it? Is it? Ed Pecker?" That's right, Pecker winced, partially shielding his eyes from the man's bleached teeth. "Wonderful, just wonderful," the man beamed. "I'm Salt Rambus, and this delectable lady is my business partner, Dottie Creamer." Your business associate?" Pecker muttered, averting his eyes from Salt Rambus and lowering his head to meet the face of Dottie Creamer. "That's right," Rambus continued in a declarative game show voice. "We are estate agents." But why you... Pecker found himself staring at the pair and marvelling, with some palpable level of disgust, at their tacky and greasy-looking synthetic tans, head-rested in gold-rimmed sunglasses and almost matching outfit. His a suit that seemed tattooed onto his lithe yet pot-bellied body, and hers with shoulder pads that leaned like fins of dead sharks. Both of them had eyebrows reddened at the edges from recent plucking. The saccharine smell of hairspray blew the odour of gravy and meat from Pecker's nose. "We're here," Creamer sang loudly, "to sell your house." "What?" Pecker took a step back and shook his head. "You must have made a mistake. My house isn't for sale." "Of course it is," Rambus declared, and stepped into the hallway, baying Creamer in after him. "Get some good shots of the tiles, beautifully ornate," he ordered, "and the ceiling features. I think they're original, aren't they, Mr. Pecker?" "Excuse me," Pecker protested and tried to block Rambus's way, but Creamer scythed between them and skillfully told Pecker he was blocking the light for her photographs. "I don't want you to take any fucking photos." Pecker slammed his front door shut without thinking, more from outrage than annoyance than anything else. "Careful," Rambus warned, "that frame is evidently original, so if you don't want a restoration cost pre-sale, you'd better be mindful how you close it." Pecker's heart raced hotly, and his lips trembled with exasperation. "Don't tell me how to close my own bastard door." "Ooh," Rambus continued, ignoring Pecker's comments. "There's a great smell of home-cooked food in here. Great move, Pecker. Really gets the folks viewing the house to imagine themselves living here." As Pecker was about to reply, he noticed that Miss Creamer was heading upstairs, flicking on the switches of all his lights and taking copious pictures of everything from the banister to the fittings, and even personal photos of Pecker's long-dead parents and treasured pets. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" he bawled. "Upstairs, Mr. Pecker," she replied absently. "It's vital that we get the best possible collection of photographs for the adverts, otherwise we risk missing a 70% yield of casual viewers, and, as we in the trade know, houses are often sold to people who claim they weren't looking to buy in the first place. Amazing, really." "Amazing," Pecker barked, trying to answer Miss Creamer as he watched Rambus stroll casually into his living room. "Ooh, plenty of light and space in here," Rambus professed from behind the door. "Are these blinds custom, Ed? I can call you Ed." "Listen." Pecker stormed into his living room and grabbed Rambus's shoulder. The agent slithered away from his grip and continued to type notes onto his tablet. There was an oozing quality about Rambus, something liquid, grease. He seemed to slide around the room as Pecker watched, his hands discharging phlegmy fingers over each surface. Pecker shook off his confusion and stormed up to Rambus's face, blocking the alleged agent from checking when the skirting boards were last painted. "You cannot barge into my home and start looking around as you please. And this bollocks about being estate agents who are here to sell my house. What in the bloody hell do you think you're talking about, pal? Rambus licked his viscous lips and spoke in fizzing microphone voice. All properties are basically for sale, Ed. Nobody lives somewhere forever. It's cyclical, isn't it? Yours is on the market. It is not, and I don't plan to move anytime soon. But you do plan to move? No, ever? Pecker rubbed his hands across his own face violently. Come on, Ed. Reddened the small areas of skin that weren't already crimson with annoyance. Obviously I may move at some point, but I'll be the one to commission arseholes like you when I decide it's time to do so. Why bother? Rambus grinned broadly. We're already here, Ed. A sudden urge to attack Rambus struck Pecker. He was able to envisage the mechanics of the act as if he was looking at an X-ray of a crime scene. As he clenched his fists, the door to the lounge opened and Miss Creamer walked in. A great house, Ed, she yelled into his ear, no more than a foot away from him. Really, the storage space alone is magnificent, although you might want to put some of those pornographic magazines somewhere safer, Ed. She wiped her hand across Pecker's chest. The one on the top of the pile was damp, Ed. Not a good look for prospective buyers. I mean, how would you feel if you reached into a vendor's cupboard and got some cum on your fingers? How would I feel? Yes, Creamer replied calmly, serpentine eyes flickering beneath the painted lids. No need to worry about it now, Ed. I've wiped the semen on your shirt, but for the future, when viewings are taking place, try and see it from their point of view, yes, Ed? They can't imagine the house of theirs with liberally sprayed jets of cum or filthy underwear scattered across the bathroom floor. You have to sell the idea of living here as much as the house itself. Exactly, Rambus confirmed, before grabbing Creamer around the waist and kissing her in a vulgar and sloppy way. Spittle ran down their faces as their tongues lolled and coiled. Ed Pecker simply shook his head in a fast and painful way. Get out! Get out, he boomed. Get the fuck out of my house! Thanks, Ed, Rambus said breathlessly, wiping the saliva from his jaw. I think we've got everything we need for now, but we'll see you again for the viewings. Get out! Pecker screamed hoarsely and pushed at the pair, forcing them through the hallway and out into the night. Our card, Rambus said, flicking it back into Pecker's feet. Just in case you need to get in touch before we come round again. I won't! Pecker slammed the door and panted against it. He could barely get his breath, quite unsure how the process of the 15 minutes had elapsed. He walked back to his wasted dinner with automaton steps. The sausage was cold and had a smell of bland gristle. Ed ate it anyway. He washed up his plate habitually. Muscle memory guided his hands as his eyes stared out at nothing like the trap through portholes of a sinking ship. As he extinguished the lights downstairs, Ed Pecker caught sight of the card laying on one of his baroque tiles. He lifted it up and read, Upsticks reallocation of estate agents. Your connection to another place. Ed traced the finger over the phone number and decided to call it. If he could speak to their office, perhaps to a supervisor or a manager, he'd be able to complain and clear it all up. He listened to the digital tones as they rang in. A voice answered. It was unmistakably Rambus. Hi, Ed. What can I do for you? I wanted to speak to the manager of Upsticks. Speaking. You're in charge. We're equal partners, Ed. Are you ready for a viewing? What? No, I was calling to complain. Rambus's voice took on a grave and deathly tone. Oh. In that case, we can come back inside and talk directly. Back inside? Where are you? We're where you left us, Ed. Pecker craned his neck slowly towards the front door and fanned the porch light with a trembling finger. As soon as the bulb lit, the unambiguous silhouettes of the agents appeared. Ed turned the light off quickly, hung up the phone, pulled the chain across the lock and backed up the stairs to his room, certain that he wouldn't sleep. Ed Pecker was frowsy and battered when he awoke. He'd only slept for 2 hours. He'd stayed on watch until dawn, every few minutes, masked in the darkness of his landing. Pecker had crept down to the top of the stairs and observed the doorway. The estate agents were there on every occasion apart from the last. He wanted to call the police, but what could he say? That he was being forced to sell his house? The idea of it by a company of agents was laughable. Instead, scurrying on bended legs like a naked rat, Pecker simply watched them through the frosted glass. Occasionally, like slugs in winter, the fingers of the agents skated slowly down the windows of his door, and Pecker gagged and retreated. Eventually the portico was clear. So odd was the sensation of them being gone, Pecker was forced to consider if they'd ever been there at all, as was natural. Still, the card remained, an affirmation of their putrid existence. Pecker readied himself for work, shaving off the dishevelled straw of his 2-day beard. He looked at the reckoning stare of his pallid reflection and hurled the idiocy of the conjoined agents from his thoughts. It didn't last. The posters and the billboards were everywhere. Littering every wall, lamppost, phone box, fence, and elevated on stakes stabbed into empty soil, photographs of Pecker's home with the banner of "For Sale" splattered across them, adorned with what seemed like the entire neighbourhood. Pecker felt immediate violation. His sanctum had been turned inside out, like the pocket of a pauper. The privacy of his rooms, the luscious silence of his house had been torn away and was being screamed across this part of the city. Some of the pictures even contained the images of Pecker himself. They were obviously taken during his protests on the previous evening. He was captured in them, hung in the corner of the room like a dusty heirloom. Pecker began to tear them down. He ripped the canvases away from their awnings and tore at the posters like a feral being angered by the intoxicating odour of raw meat. Pecker felt exhausted after 5 minutes of frantic action. He stared down towards the humming plaza ahead and saw that the pictures and the billboards continued at regular intervals as far as he could see. The images of his home were like white crests on waves that roll endlessly towards horizon. Ed Pecker mithered in the afternoon shadows, pacing in bedazzled fury throughout the rooms of his house, bamboozled and flummoxed. Pecker could not believe that those bastard agents had done this to him. It was awful enough that they'd arrived at his home unsolicited and began their plans and pitches, but to advertise his home? That was something far worse. That was exposure. His sanctity was being usurped. With the blinds drawn, the curtains clenched, and only the most essential of electric lights fizz-kindled, Pecker waited that evening for another visit. If they came again, he'd be ready. The police would be called in seconds, and he would explain the entire debacle and have them hauled hastily away to white-collar clinks. By the time the news began at 10 p.m, Pecker's eyelids felt heavy and dense. He yawned tired expletives towards the general direction of outside, in a frail rejection of perceived invasion. When the clock chimed midnight, Pecker gave up the vigil and slunk to bed, scrunching and unfolding the agent's card several times as he headed upstairs. The voices awoke him. Pecker froze in the darkness of his bedroom. His crusted and sleep-knitted eyes flickered wildly as he tried to adjust his sight to the ashen wash. He quickly identified numerous figures, framed by the streetlights that diluted the night beneath his blinds. They stood around his bed. Their breathing was almost deafening. Shrouded and featureless due to the gloomy hours, only an occasional pallid feature was palpable. A nose, a jawline, a single cheek fluttering with a nervous tick. It was like a mass, a black mass, lay there, his sheets clutched to his mouth, stifling a husky groan. Ed Pecker saw himself as the sacrificial animal on a quilted tablet. There were several seconds of disbelief, of dream lunacy. There were moments when it was impossible to determine whether the scene was true or illusory. And Pecker soon realised that it was absolutely real. "Ed," a familiar voice perforated the swarthy dusk. "Ed? Ed, are you awake, Ed?" "Rambus?" Pecker questioned wearily. Is that you, Rambus?" "He's awake," the agent announced, and suddenly Pecker was blinded by the intense light of his own lamps and ceiling bulbs as well as what appeared to be torches. Pecker pulled the quilt over his face like a child with a creaking wardrobe. What seemed like dozens of sharp hands prodded him and tore at the quilt, pulling it away from his nakedness. "It's an open house, Ed!" Pecker stared up from splitting eyes, and there were Creamer and Rambus, the former staring from Ed's face to his exposed groin. "Better cover that up, Ed. You've got guests." Pecker's lips trembled as he cupped his genitals and stared wildly at the couples and singles who stood in applauding arc around his bed. "We've got people from all over the city who want to take a look at your home," Rambus declared proudly, sitting next to Pecker and tapping the top of his head in a strange act of petting. "We're going to take the price up 10 grand, Rambus whispered as he leaned into the petrified Pecker. "We're going to fuck that decimal point up a few zeros, baby." Help me, Pecker begged to the faces of the strangers stood around him. "We are helping you, Ed," Creamer consoled, tapping Pecker's bare arse. "Helping you to sell this house. Now come on everyone, let's get looking around." The grinning strangers followed the agents out of Pecker's bedroom in a conga of inquisitive nods and pokes. "So, that's bedroom 1, Rambus's voice drifted off in the hallway. "Selling your house against your will?" the officer questioned doubtfully. "Yes," Pecker panicked, crouched against this chest of drawers he had pulled behind his bedroom door. "Posters, billboards, the lot, all around the neighbourhood. And now they're in here again with a bunch of fucking strangers." "Strangers? Burglars, sir?" "What? No, they're potential buyers." "So the house is for sale then, sir?" "No, that's the problem. They've arrived and they told me, the owner, that the house is for sale. They said to me, your house is for sale. I didn't ask them to come." "Well, it would have to be the owner they would inform, sir." The officer sounded bored and coma-toned, as though he was picking his feet whilst paying lip service to Pecker's call. "I know that, but I've not given them permission to advertise the house, have I?" "Well, sir, I'm sure if you contact their office and explain the problem." "I have." Pecker lowered his voice and cut the phone. "When I called them, it was one of the agents who fucking well answered." "I imagine they manned the phone, sir." "They were stood outside my fucking door." "Sir, please control yourself. Acting in such a frantic way will not solve anything at all. Surely it'll just make things worse." "Oh, really? Well, can you tell me then why the filthy hawking agents and their entourage woke me up in the middle of the night, in my house, in my bedroom?" The officer sighed. "Well, when we sold our house, the agents had keys to show people around when we were working. It's probably just that, isn't it? It's convenient." "But I'm not at work, and it's fucking 4 a.m. "People work shifts, sir. I know I do." This is ridiculous. "Look, sir, nobody can force you to sell your house, can they? I've done as much as I can here, but honestly, you must realise what this sounds like. Estate agents are showing people around your house, yes. The hour isn't the most convenient, but that's something to take up with them. If you don't get offered the sum you want, just turn the deal down." But, please, sir, we have plenty of real crimes to be getting on with." And the phone died. Pecker sat there for a while, then edged towards the door. The footsteps and susurrated voices hummed and drummed below him. Pecker had no idea what to do. Dawn was creeping into the house like ghosts of eager cats. He tried to view the problem objectively. Removing himself and his annoyance, Pecker wondered for a moment if this was how it went now. Maybe it was normal. He'd inherited this house. He'd never sold a house or bought a house before. Was it possible that agents just engaged themselves to random properties? No. His lips curled back above his teeth in complete disgust. That wasn't what they did at all. No way. These bastards were interlopers. Pecker reasoned that if they would not listen to his protests, then he would protest in a way they couldn't ignore. "Good morning," Pecker announced as he entered his kitchen and eased into the crowd who sat and stood around the dining table. "Had a good look, have you?" The variety of peering faces nodded eagerly, and Rambus and Creamer, both sat at the table drinking Ed Pecker's coffee, grinned up at him with their searchlight teeth. "Good to see you up, Ed." "Yes, everyone's taken a look, and we're about to talk sealed bids. The open house has been a success, Ed, you'll be pleased to know. Everyone here wants to put in an offer to the bowl." Rambus rattled Ed's empty fruit bowl and nodded towards the stack of paper and empty envelopes on the corner of the table. "I think we're looking very good, Ed. Very good." "Excellent," Pecker replied, "although there is one more thing to consider." "Oh?" Creamer asked, biting a pen. "And what's that, Ed?" "This," he smiled. He dropped his shorts and crouched down on the kitchen tiles, ahead of his cooker. Straining with wild glee, Ed Pecker began to shit on his own floor. His rectum pulsing, the excrement crowning, Pecker stared up at the crowd and nodded. "Want the house, do you? Hey? You want this house? Do you want it now? Do you want it with shit on its floor? Ha? Do you? Do you? Ha ha! Do you want it with shit on the floor?" And his laughter boomed around the silent faces. The Crays moved in 9 weeks after their successful bid. Colin hired the van and drove it himself, and Michelle Cray directed the packing, moving and unloading. Their 2 sons, Umber and Dutton, played with the boxes and asked who the man was that stood in the corner and cried. "Oh, that's Ed Pecker," the mother replied. "He comes with the house." "Can we play with him?" they asked excitedly. "I can't see why not," Colin answered. rubbing their hair. So the boys rushed over to where Ed Pecker stood, and they began kicking his shins repeatedly. The sounds of his sobs were lost beneath their laughter. Over the years, as the boys grew up and the Crays lived their lives, many of the important and notable occasions were recorded in photographs. Displayed on cabinets and various tables, the framed memories showed Christmas days, Easters, anniversaries, even funerals. In almost every picture, lingering somewhere in the background, perhaps by a standard lamp or peering over the back of the sofa, was the gaunt and weathered face of Ed Pecker. As familiar as an old blanket, and just as able to drift into the background of the home it inhabits, Pecker existed and faded into terrible silence, gradually fraying and rotting. He became a cobweb, a stain, and a floorboard that needs fixing, but to whom repair never arrives. In fleeting moments of cognizance, Pecker was aware that he'd never left the house, as was his stubborn wish, but that would be tempered by the fact that it had been sold against his will, and that he had never seen a penny of its cost. As the realisation sank in time and time again, Ed Pecker would do the only thing he could. He would allow his mind to cloud over and ease into nothingness, as the Crays lived their lives around him. Then, when the time arrived, the husk of Ed Pecker was left out in the rain for the council to collect. All done. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope if you ever sell a house or want to sell a house or buy a house, I hope that the same agents don't come for you and wait outside your door. But if they do, at least you can shit on the floor. So for now, with that in mind, you take care, look after yourselves, and like I said at the start, I've got to drop a video in a few days' time which has got a big some big news about my writing in general. So I shall be in touch. Until then, take care. All the best.